It's the 8th of May 2009 and we're continuing with our series of Centenary interviews. We're joined today by Tony Shepherd, who was here in 1976 as final year as school captain.
Yes.
So welcome Tony, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks Darren, pleasure.
So Tony, we might begin by getting you to tell us a little bit about your life before you arrived at Kogarah Marist.
Okay. Well, I actually came from outside the district. I lived and grew up in Beverly Hills. And because my father was moving this way for work, I actually ended up seeking application to go to Kogarah. I had to come with brother Frederick in those days when I was 9 years old. And so for the first 2 years of my time here, I actually travelled from Beverly Hills every day.
Okay, so that would have been a long journey?
It was. For a 10-year-old, it was a long journey. It was a long walk, then a long bus ride, then the train ride, then the walk. But I think it probably contributed significantly to independence and growing up generally, which perhaps is not as relevant these days.
Yeah. So trying to think back to being 10 years old and arriving here, what are your memories of the place?
Well, I mean, the core of the place is still here. I think the buildings. I think my initial memory is that I went into Brother Herbert's multimedia class, which I recall was the really impactful thing for me in those days. It was 40 years ahead of its time. With headphones and cameras and films and everything else. So it was sort of a strange orientation to the school in that regard, But that was my earliest memories, and I remember all the older boys playing handball in the grounds and thinking how skilled they were. The fact that they could actually bounce a ball on their hand, which was not that hard really, but at the time it was.
It's impressive when you're 10.
It was an impressive feat.
So you moved from Brother Herbert's class through into this sort of high school.
I did.
Memories of those times, like teachers, events.
Look, it was a great time. I'm one of those very fortunate people, I think, that can say I thoroughly enjoyed my schooling here. I think it was probably the days where the shift was really taking place between the majority of teaching being brothers and the introduction of lay teachers. So I think I saw that changeover taking place. So that when I began, I wouldn't have the percentage, but I think 60 or 70% would have been brothers. Moving into high school and through, it really just reversed to, in the end, perhaps 20% would have actually been brothers as such.
And male-female mix on staff?
Very few female. Funnily enough, one of my favourite teachers, or two of my favourite teachers, were Tim McMullen and Marge McMullen.
That's right. Right, yes.
And Marge, I think, was certainly one of the early female teachers, and there were only literally a couple of female teachers that I recall, and that would have been later on, years 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yep.
But certainly in terms of impactful teachers and thinking through those years, I mean, Tim McMullen would be one of the main ones, I think, the history teacher who really almost introduced, in my view, a university model of teaching in early days, not just taking notes and things, but making you think it through. And of course, Brother Coleman, I remember, who was almost virtually a spiritual advisor role at the school. And the most amazing thing about Coleman, I remember, was that he would, at the start of each year, stand at the front gate or the back gate and greet the kids as they came in. And within a week, he would know the names of 90% of the kids. He was just phenomenal in that regard.
Yeah.
And was the first one, I think, when we talk about religion studies. He actually broke the mould and went into the situation of encouraging us to listen to music and poetry. And in those days was Neil Young and Cat Stevens and all of those sorts of guys, and to try and decipher the songs and attach meaning and significance. So I think that was also a breakthrough period. And the other breakthrough period I remember was my first year in high school, was when Jesus Christ Superstar came out.
Okay.
And I remember the heresy of letting us listen to this thing.
Yes.
I remember the question we were asked at the start was, who wrote this? Was it two priests? Was it a priest and a lay person, or was it two lay people? And of course everyone said two priests, it had to be the answer about Jesus Christ. And it was revealed that it was actually two lay people. We were all stunned by that, But, I mean, I remember that being just an incredibly memorable time sitting on the desk listening to it.
Yeah, well, very interesting,
And they'd be larger than life teachers. I think Kenny Boothroyd would have been here at the time.
Ken was very big, and I think Ken was such a memorable character because of his association with St George, the football team. And often while he was doing the training for St George, the players would come up. So we'd be in the gym, and you'd have Craig Young and Robert Stone, and who also went to the school, a friend of mine, and regrettably died only recently.
Yes.
So you'd have those players around. I think you felt very, very important, having the players around there. But Ken was really another one who opened it up in terms of, I think again, way ahead of his time in terms of basic health concepts and living healthily and fitness, not just pure sport.
And I guess in terms of facilities at the school, there were lots of things that we knew at that stage, like the gym would have been fairly new, the science block fairly new.
The gym, I remember these buildings being built. The gym was fairly new, the science block was new. The chapel was relatively new.
1960, 61.
Yeah, that's right. And there was a lot of open space, though, I recall, around the place. And I noticed a number of buildings have been knocked over now where I started in 5th class and 6th class. But I still believe you can still see the core of the place. You know, it's amazing how bigger it is now. But the actual quadrangle remains the same, you know, and as the sort of core of the environment.
Yeah. So as we mentioned in the introduction, by 1976 you're in year 12.
Yep.
You're school captain.
Yep.
What's your memory of that year and that experience of being school captain?
Oh, look, it was a wonderful experience for me. One of the things I think about this school and my peers at the school was this whole idea that it was one of the very early bastions, I think, of diversity of talent and skill. Yep. In the sense that, you know, these days I think we often see, you know, silos of talent. There's the sports kids and there's the kids who do music and debating and there's the kids who are the smart kids or the studious ones. My recollection of those years was the fact that we would literally run from one pursuit to the next. I mean, we might be in the choir, then you'd pull your choir gear off and pull your footy jersey on and go and play A-grade footy or go into the swimming environments. I think the other thing I remember in my year as school captain was the year that, because there were many of the lay teachers who were quite young, it was the first time that we were able to call them by their first names, and they really became quite great coaches and mentors in those days, which there was always a degree of separation prior to that, you know, particularly in terms of the brothers, the respect thing that went with that. But that was the first time, you know, you see your later call them by their first name, and they were actually trying to change the teaching method. And again, Tim McMullen I mentioned earlier, you know, he would encourage us to look at sources and talk about things and then take our own notes rather than having notes and things dictated as such. The other thing I recall was that obviously there weren't girls at the school then, but there were a number of activities in Year 12 with the girls from Nazareth and then from St Ursula's at Kingsgrove. I think it was fairly early days where they would invite those girls across and we'd go between the schools to do English assignments, plays and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so 1976 concludes, you leave the school.
Yes.
Where's life taken you since then?
Where's life taken me since then? Well, I left the school, I went straight to Sydney University to law school.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, I think it's worthy of note that one of my history teachers in Year 12 was Jim Alsop, who taught for 2 years, and Jim has recently been appointed the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal in New South Wales. It's the third most significant vice-regal role.
Yeah.
I say that because Jim and I went to university together. He as a mature student and me as just a first year. So went through law school, qualified as a lawyer, practiced for several years, and then probably about 20 years ago set up a specialist management consultancy, given that I wanted to travel more, and again this idea of thinking laterally and doing things a little differently. And so these days I'm very fortunate. I have my own business and I travel the globe. I travel 6-7 months of the year.
Okay.
We have a specialist negotiation consultancy, so I get involved in all sorts of deals, structures, arrangements, all sorts of things. And communication remains a big theme for me, so we work with a lot of the global companies when they're you know, announcing their financial results and getting them ready for all that sort of stuff. So it's been a developing practice, one I probably wouldn't have been smart enough to think of myself, but fell into more than anything else. So it's been a great time.
That's great.
All right.
So in summary, you know, I see a theme going through what you're saying. Kogarah is a great comprehensive school in many ways. At its best, comprehensive schools at their best seem to cater for all the needs rather than just focusing on one. And I think at our best, that's what we are. And it sounds like in the 70s that was the same.
Same sort of thing.
We've talked to blokes from the 40s and they're saying the same sorts of things.
Look, I think so. I think the school has a soul. You know, I think everyone would acknowledge their own school has a soul to some extent.
Yeah.
But I think it was really living and breathing here. And certainly in the 70s, which was my time here, I think it was also a pivotal time for the balance between, you know, lay and religious staff and gender-based issues and a whole range of political awareness.
Yep.
And I think the school positioned us well for that. I mean, I have absolutely no unpleasant memories of my schooling. Probably I've obviously got into trouble and cane and things every now and again in the early days, but no, I think it was really a wonderful environment and a culture, and I think I was very fortunate to have been a part of it all.
Okay. Thank you for your time this morning.
Pleasure. Thank you.